Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Bridget. I host the Boakye podcast slash Boakye YouTube series where I interview people in my network about conversations that I want to have, conversations that I'm probably already having that I would love to share with a broader audience. So in the first part of this video, which I'll link below, I invited my good friend whom I met on my way to business school, Warren Ballard, to speak with me about his perspective about the relationship between African immigrants and African Americans in the United States. And a lot of the conversation was actually us going back and forth and trying to understand each other in the first part. And in this second part, we delve into more solutions. And I think Warren really pushed me towards thinking in that vein, right? Like, how do we move away from rehashing our experiences and our traumas to building on better ways to communicate with each other, better ways to understand each other, and better ways to support each other. This video jumps right into the middle of that conversation. Literally was a 2-hour conversation and I split it in half for the sake of, putting it out in chunks. This video will start from where we left off in the last conversation. If you want to catch up on kind of the context that drives this second part, please check out part 1, which I'll link down below. All right, as always, I'd love to hear from you. If you do have a chance to watch this video, you can connect with me on Instagram or my website. I'll definitely get back to you. Cheers.
Right. So okay, let's deal with the older Africans or a lot of the younger ones. Like, we get it. Like, we get it, right? By and large, we get it. Older demographic we have to deal with, right? And what I'm saying is they have their issue, but I look at it as an opportunity to educate. We all hold stereotypes about each other. African American kids like brutally harassing, tormenting African kids for being dirty, for being, you're an African booty scratcher. Warren, the pain is enough to go around. Like, every day being tormented by your white teachers, by your black friends, being tormented by black kids for being darker skinned, on top of all of that, right? So what I'm saying is we cannot, like, if you want to talk about kind of like perceptions within the community, that needs to be uprooted. It's on both sides.
I'm not. But what I'm saying is not acknowledging that. Like, I get that. Like, from a social,
Right.
yeah.
So
Like,
we're good then.
Like, what I'm saying, Bridget, is that so me, I see parents, like, I see the older generation, and the first thing I think about is they got kids, just like white racists. Oh, they got fucking kids, and I can only imagine. Like, my friend, oh yeah, his mom is saying that to him, and yeah, he may tell me, oh, I think it's bullshit,
right?
But shit, he got to take a woman home to his mama, and his mama kind of has to approve, like, oh, this is it,
Right.
Why you can't get African wife or some shit
Right.
like that?
Right.
So to me, I don't
But
think
don't
that the
African
problem is
Americans have?
like this. Is like saying this is like saying when a racist die, their kids are all of a sudden not gonna be racist.
I agree.
Like,
That's why we. Okay, but don't. Okay, let me say it this way. To me, right, my I think where I have a unique advantage to influence things, having been on both sides, right, is to tell African kids, like, yo, don't listen to your mom. But I also know that indirectly,
kids are gonna be kids, though. The bullying and all that. Like,
right.
Everybody was bullied to some sort of extent. Like,
Why don't you want to acknowledge that there is a trauma that African Americans have gone through the hands of African Americans?
I'm not acknowledging it. So, as children, motherfuckers do mean shit all the time.
But we're talking about a specific kind of ideology that was engineered by white America to pit African Americans against African immigrants, which had implications on both sides. And for Black African kids was especially traumatic. No, I hear the pain, like, deeply. I know Africans who are like, yo, we're not effing with African Americans because they have their own personal experiences of being traumatized, of being abused, for being darker skinned. Right. So I get that. right? I'm not of the perspective that that should be where the relationship ends. Like, how can we heal from that? And I
Right.
also get African Americans saying, like, Africans come in with notions that are untrue. I'm saying, don't point at each other, point at white supremacy. But here's my other thing, right? Like, I guess that's it.
I mean,
I
because my thing is like I acknowledge all that, right?
right.
But we're intellectuals here, so I thought we were elevating the conversation. Yes,
Okay.
bullying goes
Okay.
on for sure.
Right.
I would
Right.
not I would not sit here
Okay.
and say that, at a point in my past that I ain't call a motherfucker, that sounded differently than me, that, you know what I'm saying, an African Buddhist, like that. Yeah.
We
Like,
won't come
but
for you for
now,
that.
no, shit, I'm just gonna be real with you, right?
Right.
That shit,
Right.
I'm not denying that shit didn't happen, right? And that was from a place of ignorance. Yes, I agree with you. All I'm saying is for the allyship to work, it isn't for. And I understand you're gonna run into a lot of stupid people or people that their feelings are just constant. It's like their thought process is so heavily aligned with how they feel.
Right.
I get it.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So
Right.
when they say some
Right.
shit to you that, oh, you need to shut the fuck up, or you're not being an ally, or shit like that.
Right.
I'm not speaking on
Okay.
those people because then
Okay.
there's some sort of cognitive dissonance there, and you realize that. But I'm talking about how can we be part of the solution. So I'm more than willing to be part of the solution here. All I'm saying is here in this country, all I would like for, I guess simply for African immigrants, is to by and large acknowledge the contributions that Black Americans have made to incentivize people to come over here and to sort of not resort, like you said, to these racial trope and themes about our lack of progress.
I
That's
agree.
it. Or even, saying, like, because to me, I think that it's more accurate to say, hey, I fully relate to ADOS. Cause I mean, I'm an American descendant of slaves too, like shit. But I fully, you fully relate socially, but partly economically, to the degree of partly. But Bridget, but let me finish, because the policy of marginalization
Right.
in America was not directed at your family, your parents, your great grandparents, your grandparents, et cetera, et cetera. That's so when I say that you can't fully relate, I contextualize that because while we were being subjected to these policies and legislation and sort of this dystopian form of socialism in the form of slavery, if I come over to your country,
You keep
it's like,
saying that.
oh, I understand the differences between the tribes. No, I
It's not
don't.
the
I could
same.
never.
You're talking about a cultural difference that you can't understand. I think Africans can relate to certain things African Americans do culturally. I agree. I won't come here and say African immigrants can relate culturally. I don't think that's true. But I think there are ways in which, based on America's segregation by community, it's funny to me because like I told you with the Yale example, there are African Americans who can't relate to the conversation we're having right now about the movement and its implications, social, like economically, because they don't fall under that bracket. They don't get it. Whereas African immigrants would, right? And then the
Yeah.
last thing that bothers me before you asking your question is this idea of, ancestor ownership, right? And that's something I think this is going to throw, people are going to feel strongly about it either way. But for me, when I learned African history, when I learned African American history, right? My perception of the way ancestorship worked is that there were Africans who were taken, we would agree, alone, right, without their families, who were broken apart from their families and came to the United States. Some of those, like fathers or brothers or whatever, their family members were left back in Africa, who now grow up in our generations of the Africans we see now. So of the enslaved African being only ancestors to African Americans, it's not true. Families were broken apart in Africa. They're also ancestors of the same people, are they not?
Everybody
We're
is.
talking
On this
no, I'm
planet.
talking specifically in the context of the American slave trade vis-a-vis West Africa. I'm saying that this idea, I think Ados is on the point about Africans not getting reparations from America. Fine, I don't think African
Yeah.
immigrants should get reparations, right? African immigrants need to fight for their own reparations vis-a-vis colonization. We need to have our
100%.
own. Yeah, let's.
100%.
I don't mind. We have our own entitlement to reparations, but it doesn't need to be tied to that of African Americans in this country. But when we're talking about today's economic kind of like the economic policies or infrastructure that undermines Black people systematically, you cannot remove African immigrants from that. When I go to the bank, they're not like, oh, since you live in the same project that Warren lives in, but since you're African, we're subjected to the same economic policies. I can't relate to you
I
culturally.
agree with that. I agree with that part.
Right. There are
Yeah.
things maybe your mom does at home that
I
I
agree
don't
with that
understand.
part. So
Then we're on
I'm
the same
agreeing
page.
with everything you just said.
So what's the issue about
So
Africans?
the issue is, so for you, these things that you mentioned, right? And I understand, like your passion, like you have a legitimate point, right? Yes, you can fully, the way you see it from your perspective, you fully relate to it socially and economically. From your perspective, I can see that. You know what I mean? So I'm going to be solution oriented here and say, yes, you have a well thought out point. But when I say you can't fully relate, it's in the context of, as it relates to America, your ancestral line was not subjected to the marginalization in America. So we agree. It's just the only difference. We just haven't, how we articulate it is the problem.
We agree.
So it's like when I have a conversation with you on the tone of your post was more so preaching to me like, oh, this is how you should do it, right? And I'm like,
this is how who should do what?
How we should combat racism in America. And I'm sitting here like, okay, I don't like. Okay, it's tone. I'm just gonna be honest. It was the.
No, I hear you.
It may be an event of tone policing, right? That could be veritably true. But to me, it's like the way it came across was like, I wish she would word it in a way that says, "Hey, I'm solution oriented. I'm doing, my part, and I stand with you, and leave it at that." But I do understand that from your perspective, you've arguably dealt with individuals that tried to say, "Listen, how dare you come and have a conversation with me about what it is to be Black in America," right? Because they could have had a conversation with somebody else that says, "I can't understand why you can't get ahead. Racism was yesterday." I mean, I even saw the video in DC of the immigrant woman saying, "You kill your own people," and I'm like, what kind of logic is that? Makes no fucking sense, right? So I guess it's like the way I word things. Like if I was to come over to your country, because yes, you guys also have a bone to pick with colonialists. You stole our shit, our resources.
You stole our family members.
I would like to have that shit back, or you need to atone for that. But I'm not gonna come over here and preach to you like when I come over here and sort of,
I get it.
I'm like, hey, how can I better assist you in your endeavor? That's it.
I get it.
You get what I'm saying?
I get it. Okay, so what I'm saying is, and I'll put the post up in this conversation.
Edit that shit. You gotta cut out there some parts.
No. I'm talking about my Instagram post so that people get what we're talking about, right? I posted the picture and then the comment it was in specific reaction to something I saw going on social media where people were like, why are Africans not marching?
Yeah.
Because Amadou Diallo is being killed, because they're Africans who are subjected to the same thing. And I'm like, yo, it's not lost on us. I wasn't preaching to anyone. I was just saying to people who are saying that Africans
It's
are
not lost.
not.
Okay, so but
It's not lost on Africans about our kind of intermeshed experiences as a Black collective in America.
well, Bridget, I would have to say, hey, it's maybe not lost on you and the people within your circle or universe. But to be honest, since we know that there's bad apples on both sides, we know that there's bad apples. If you can acknowledge there's bad apples on both sides, you have to agree that there are some African immigrants that don't understand, or they only protest or speak out against racism if it's in their direct benefit. Right?
That's
I'm not
okay.
saying that that's all.
Okay,
Huh?
I guess my post was like to show, and I do understand that I could have phrased it better. My post was to show that yes, we are doing it. Yes, we're
Okay.
like wholly committed to this cause. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it, right?
Okay.
And the last part of my post was very specific and intentional about saying that our common enemy is white supremacy. It's not each other.
Yeah.
That's my whole spiel. Like,
Right.
if you're on the continent, whether you're on the continent or here, we're still under the same kind of like global.
I get it. Yeah. So I agree with you though, but I would agree. I just disagree with that small part saying, like by and large, like I think that
That's fine.
as it relates to you, and
I
like
get
I
it.
would just state, hey, I'm willing to partner, or I'm willing to be part of the solution, right? Because there's some idiots on
Right.
this side of the fence. I'm gonna agree with that 100%.
Right.
But as long as I think that it is incumbent on you to say, hey, there's some idiots that on your side of the fence that is doing the same, unproductive shit as well. And but how I focus my, if I was to sort of partner with you on your struggle, I'm gonna
Right.
sit here and say, how can I be a better ally?
But how is it your struggle?
Huh?
How is it just like this issue of police brutality, of white supremacy in
No,
America?
I'm saying if I went to your country, like if I was in your country.
Right. But to me, it's our collective struggle as Black people. I don't need an invitation to say how can I participate in
It's
the
just how I
liberation of Black people in America.
Bridget, it's just how I position. Like if so there may be there you have to admit that there, as it relates to going to your country, there's some slight different nuances, right? Because in your country you are the majority. However, there's still some issues there. So when I come over there, if I was to come over there and so to address some of the issues socio-economically there, I'm just like, okay, so how can I be of assistance? How can I elevate the conversation, right?
Right.
For a solution. That's it. Not to sit here and just like reproject back on like Black people in general, like Black Americans or descendants of slaves in general. Oh, we get, African immigrants get slavery, blah blah blah. You need to,
Okay, let
you
me
know what I mean? It
say
kind of
this.
comes across as so.
I hear you, but here's the case that, I would love for us to like, before we go on to the last part, which is really answering the question of how we can be better allies. But my last statement on this is there are ways in which when you say this is a Black, like a descendant of slave problem, I don't see it as that. Amadou Diallo died in police hands in New York City, right? Countless African immigrants have died at the hands of police brutality. To me, it's not, I don't need an invitation from African Americans to participate in a struggle that I see every single day in my community. It's my problem as much as it's anyone else, right? So, and also, secondly, I want us to acknowledge that there are African immigrants. I've spent the majority of my life in America. There are ways in which when I'm in Ghana, I have to ask for a seat at that table because I don't know it, right? So I'm constantly wrestling between like, what do I know? I feel more at home dealing with like social issues in America than I do back in Ghana. I don't know that social infrastructure. I
Yeah.
grew up here, right? My formative years were in America. I studied American history. I'm an American citizen. So now, I mean, this idea of needing kind of, and there are a lot of African immigrants who are like second, third generation who are American in spirit. They don't have you can't say, oh, you should go back home and solve those issues, or would you need an invitation back home? They don't get that. They don't have any affiliation with those countries back home. So this is what they know, and this is what they should feel entitled to speak on, right? Um,
Yeah.
but I do understand that my post, I think you're right. I don't think it was like forward thinking. It was just rehashing an issue, right? And I don't and I guess I wasn't in the spirit to be like solutions oriented, because I feel like my life's work, honestly, is trying to drive a solution. So one day I can try to tackle a conversation in the community and try to present a different side. I left business school for this specific work, to try to bring the two communities together. Like, I could not have paid a bigger price for that. So this idea of, I feel like I'm constantly driving at solutions. So yes, you're right. I don't think the tone of that was like solutions oriented, but I also think it was intentionally trying to address a specific conversation.
That's fair.
Um, yeah.
That's fair.
So let's close off here. Ooh, we're almost at 2 hours. I thought Zoom would kick us out by now.
I
Let's close
know.
off here, right? So there is a valid, I think there is a valid like claim that, or there's a valid conversation to be had about Africans needing to be better allies. Can you give us like off the top 3 ways you think? And I'm not gonna debate you on this. I'm gonna let you have the last word. So whatever you want to say, feel free.
Oh,
I'm not
Jesus.
whatever. This is all you. What are 3 ways you think African immigrants can be better allies to African Americans?
Hmm. This dialogue was very helpful, right?
Hmm.
To bridge the disconnect, because at the end of the day, like, yes, I acknowledge, uh, that you're impacted as well, right? Um, I think that I sort of position myself, or I place myself in someone else's shoes. So I think about, if I was to go over to your country, how would I, present myself? I'm not gonna the
Hmm.
American know-it-all. You know what I mean? Like that. That's
Right.
privilege, right? Um, but it's more so, okay. So how can I elevate the conversation and stay focused on what we're trying to achieve here? Because to be honest, if we it's I get that, some of y'all have been, this is all you know, right? But still, at the end of the day, ancestrally, we sort of trace the lineage. All I'm saying is I'm a product of those policies, the US policies, right? Just as sort of your lineage, you sort of a product of what was going on in Ghana.
Hmm.
And, and, and it's okay to acknowledge those differences,
Hmm.
right? There's nothing wrong with that.
I agree.
Um, and so as we work together, and we have, because like you said, every Black experience is not the same. There's some poor ones,
Hmm.
there's some middle class ones, there's some well-to-do ones. Yeah, but the goal is sort of to hold the country accountable
Hmm.
to its principles and values, as I live in the United States, and my family's blood was integral in this country being what it is today. Just as, if uh, an immigrant sort of came from sort of a similar situation in their own country, just didn't work out there, so they came here, right? And also, I think that there should be this sort of, yeah, you're gonna meet stupid people, right? That sort of give you a bad taste about
Hmm.
Black Americans, right? that's gonna happen in any race. You're gonna meet some white people that do the same exact shit. Indian people, Asian people, they
Right.
like they gonna do this islander, whatever race, because Indian is not a race. But they're gonna do the same exact shit. It's just sort of like the Jewish person, which kills me. Talks about they can relate to being black. Oh, yeah, I get it, but y'all got reparations. And, I mean, how else you think Israel survived?
You're
It,
comparing African immigrants.
no, okay. So you just saying you keep doing this, Bridget. I didn't say that. I didn't say that.
You
All
said
I'm saying
it's just like a Jewish person. I'm like, what? That is not the
no,
same.
I
But
didn't
I'm
say
not
that.
supposed
I'm
to
just saying it's
separate.
just interesting but there's just like these differences that we have to acknowledge, and
Hmm.
I think that I know it's difficult sometimes, but we need to focus on what the goal is. Like you said in your post, that last sentence I had no problem with. It's just that uh, coming across that hey, we don't. I I guess we have to acknowledge that there's bad apples there, and like from some of the conversations that I've had, I mean, they get some of these African immigrants get really offended when I bring up that there's sort of slight differences in the experience. So I was telling another Ghanaian friend that I work with that's on my team because he was talking about his experience being profiled, and a host of officers had their guns on them and under suspicion of drugs. I said, yeah, and then there's this other guy that's from Brazil that sort of said he was profiled as well. And I said, this is a fairly complected, I would think he was a white guy, but he didn't have an accent. I'm like, yes, like you can relate to sort of those things, but there's another piece to ethnically American Black people here. There's another piece to it. We haven't obtained justice at all. You can't just write some fucking law and say, "Oh, shit is better now." You've got to address the marginalization, you
Right.
know, towards us. And
Right.
so that's the piece that sort of gets missing in the debate, Bridget. That's all I'm saying. Is that part is important to us as well.
But I would say, and I'm not supposed to debate you on your last point, but I would
Oh, go
say
ahead.
that if anything, Africans can relate to that. Have Africans received reparations for colonization?
Uh-huh. But you
I'm
wouldn't
saying,
benefit
mhm.
from it here. That's all I'm saying. Like there's just two pieces. So like you said, hey, Ghanaians have a bone to pick with colonialists in their country. So
We do.
I don't think that if I come over there to Ghana and live there, I don't think that I should benefit from that because I was not subjected to my ancestral line was not subjected to that in that country. You get what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
but do you know how many African Americans, especially in the last 5 years, have moved to Africa, to Ghana specifically, and are reaping the benefits of what African leaders did to remove themselves from the grips of colonization? We can I think it goes both ways, right? Because now with the migration back to Africa,
Yeah.
right, you can say that African Americans are benefiting. Your whole bone is like, okay, Africans are benefiting from things African Americans have done. I completely agree, and I think the reverse is true now and will continue to be true
Yes,
as
I would say
Africans
that.
go
I would
back.
say that. I would agree with that, but I don't live there, so I wouldn't be able
But it's
to.
not about you. We're
Well, I'm
talking
sorry.
about
Like
the
I thought that the context was U.S. If we was having a
but
conversation
but to
about
me
that,
as
then
a
I would say yes.
no, but to me as an African immigrant who's navigating both places, who was raised in America, I can't just think about I don't when I'm looking at my experience or thinking intellectually, I'm not just looking at
But
the
Bridget,
US.
but
I
Bridget,
have a continental perspective to
yeah,
consider.
but Bridget is you. But the scope of the conversation is the U.S. So
No, I'm saying
what's so hard about? So what's so Bridget? Tell me what's so hard about.
mhm,
Okay, so there's this piece as it relates. Like I understand your allyship, right? As
mhm.
it relates to um, police brutality. Yeah, Ahmaud Arbery. I mean, I feel like he's immigrant as well, and Diallo.
I
Yeah,
don't know.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
But all I'm saying is we people that's generationally from America has another small piece in that where we want the U.S. to remediate those policies in the past that contributed to our marginalization or our state in America today.
Right.
That's a piece.
Right.
It's all because U.S. the way the U.S. laws are structured.
But
right?
I'm saying that we can understand that.
I'm not saying, but that's
can
okay.
understand that.
Yeah.
So don't say that we can't. We can understand it because we need that same justice from the global.
But where?
Right.
Where?
From the global
in your country.
ecosystem. Yes.
But we live. But it's like yes. I agree with that, but globally doesn't matter because the U.S. Okay, so what happens in the U.S. is specific because each country globally, globally is a amalgamation of sovereign countries with their own laws. So just because we get justice in America does not mean that Britain is gonna automatically start, reatoning or atoning for the injustices towards your country. Like y'all had to make that argument, right?
And we are, because we have.
Right. So that's the so as a sovereign country, Ghana is making its argument. We're doing the same thing in the U.S. And so that part is specific to me and my ancestors here, right? I don't know what's so hard about that.
No, there's nothing hard about it, Warren. I think what I want you to kind of understand is that maybe there's a part of being an African immigrant that no one else can relate to, which is this idea of even when you are in the diaspora, you're constantly thinking about another place. And to us, justice needs to go all around, right? So like when we're having, okay, so hear me out. So when we're having this conversation about, the need for justice in America, I'm not saying that I agree that we need to collectively fight for it, whatever your form of protest or contribution can be, you do it, right? White, Black, African, etc. You do it. What I'm saying is that you saying Africans can relate to the need for justice, to me, is questionable because I think if anything, Africans more than any other group who have been, as long as African Americans have been, because we are interconnected. I cannot separate the liberation of African Americans from the liberation of the continent, ever. African Americans to me are also my ancestors. They left from my continent. How would they get to America if they didn't come from Africa? So the need for reparations goes all around. I can,
but you can't. But to execute that, Bridget, you can't just. You have to do it within the infrastructure of the laws in a sovereign country. So I'm not gonna go over to Ghana and expect to benefit or.
But you are. There are African Americans.
No. So colonial countries have not attempted. It hasn't happened. Now you have your sovereignty.
Have not attempted to do what?
To atone for the plunder of the resources in these African countries, and some still do it today. And China is just the newest motherfuckers that's doing it. Because
we acknowledge that.
So you may have to strike that out because you have this whole little African China thing going here.
I don't mind at all, actually.
Listen, Bridget, listen.
I'm listening.
To execute, you have to do it within the construct of the law. So when I say can't relate, I guess I need to clean it up and not use that word. I'm not okay. So if we
because you keep saying you're like, it seems like you're kind of like repeating this point of it has to be in the context of the sovereign nation. And nobody's agreeing with how it has to happen. Okay. I'm saying your judgment or your statement.
I can clean
Okay.
it up. Okay, so what I really mean is, right, that there's another piece to our demonstrations, right, in America, and it's more so the remediation of the U.S. policies and legislation towards descendants of slaves in America,
Mhm.
right? That's
Mhm.
it. That we are concerned about that as well. Police brutality, cool. Yeah, yeah, we all on the same page. Yeah, we would like that. But then we had this other piece too, where we said, hey, yo, you said because it ain't like America didn't promise the shit. Go back to history. They promised it. They just didn't. They haven't executed on it, or they give
Right.
you bullshit policies that don't work, or have been
Right.
watered down completely, or hasn't had proper governance. Yeah,
And
yeah. So they
I
owe us.
agree.
They
I
owe us.
agree.
So
I
I'm just gonna say
agree.
that going forward. That's a takeaway for me to because I always say y'all can't relate to that part, but you probably you can, but because you have the same argument over in Ghana, Nigeria, wherever. You
That's
have the
all I'm
same
trying to
argument.
say.
Okay, so
Right.
we on the same page. I'm just saying,
Right.
hey, that's the piece that we also care about that y'all may not benefit from or
And
make
we're okay with that.
or have no incentive or have no you don't need, if we be real about it, you don't have
I'm
an
okay
incentive
with that. But
to
why,
even
why,
join.
why, why does that bother you so much, right? For
Mhm.
me, as an African immigrant, African Americans can get their 40 acres, the equivalent, and a mule here, and me not get one, and I would be thrilled.
Well,
I don't
we
know why,
noticed
but
we
why do I have to have an incentive to participate in the liberation of whom I consider my people?
I got
Because
a
I
question I
think if
gotta ask
you
you.
guys get it, it makes my claim for it on the continent even stronger. There is an
Good point.
incentive. It is aligned.
It's a good
That's
point.
why Malcolm X, Martin Luther King were all invested in the independence of African countries. They knew it was all aligned. I tell people this all the time. Until I don't I deeply believe that until Africa is able to get to the place where it has fully manifested in the promise of itself, Black people globally will not have the kind of positioning that they need to have. So to me, it's
I agree with
imperative that
that.
we all come together because all of our independence and all of our kind of like, economic prosperity is tied together. So
Yeah,
your fight for reparations here that I don't benefit economically from
right,
immediately does
right.
nothing. I don't understand why ADOS thinks Africans are against that part. We're fine with that.
Well, so I'll say I agree with everything you're saying, but there's a small piece. So what holds America accountable is its laws.
Right.
It may not necessarily be the case for
That's fine.
other,
And
other countries. So
right,
when you say that you benefit, so let's say okay, so let's just say for example, let's say U.S. pays out reparations
right,
to atone for or not pay,
right,
but implement some sort of structural framework around
right,
reparations to Black people, right?
right,
Okay,
right,
so what next? So is the next thing? So okay, so people in the African countries, well, the U.S. paid
right,
the Black people there because we have laws. We have laws that
right,
they were just doing what they're supposed to do.
right,
But
right.
if
I
there's no
think
laws in those
right.
other countries, then there's a problem.
Warren, yes, I agree, right? That it may not necessarily map on. And I think that's on Africans. And there are African Americans I know in Africa who are fighting for reparations for Africans in
You
Africa.
should, and
And
then you should
they,
stop stealing your shit. Yeah, I get it.
no, it's not, I don't care. I think we're all intertwined. That's the thing. I don't get why it bothers, like, it shouldn't bother us as a collective, right? Because to me, the
It's not
money is
bothering
gonna
me.
no, I'm saying like you said they should get out of my shit. Like I don't care that African Americans are fighting for reparations for African countries in Africa. A lot of them go there
No,
and they say, that's
I'm not
all.
saying that we shouldn't fight. Like, yeah, I mean, your
No,
argument,
what
your
I'm
argument.
saying, Warren, is that like anybody can you pick wherever you want to fight. As for me, as a Black person who understands our history and our collective like
Yeah,
interdependence, it doesn't matter to me where you fall. We're all fighting for the same thing, and I think the ripple down effects will be similar, right? I see African Americans here who make money, take it back to the continent. So I can only imagine if people ask some African Americans get reparations here and they take it back to the continent. Like there's so many direct and indirect ways that it could benefit the continent. That's not why I want it to happen for African Americans, even though I wouldn't get it, because I think it's deserved, it's overdue, unequivocally. It has nothing to do with whether it's gonna benefit me as a person. It really does. I don't care. I
it's
don't care.
interesting.
If I
I
don't get
think
it,
that people. So I don't have that. I don't have that same sort of. I think people do what's immediately in the best
in their
interest. And
nope,
so you are doing something as a matter of like white people. Like
principle,
white people have no incentive to be out here and advocating for that U.S. upholds its deal
right?
or upholds its promises to Black people, or start treating us with a little dignity and respect.
But now
They
they
have
are.
no
Some of them,
they have no incentive. It does not
right,
benefit them at all.
right,
And so I said,
right.
look, I appreciate that because you're doing something that you're convicted by your conscience.
Exactly.
But that's not like I don't expect that because it's not in
But
your best interest. Because
you're told you're. Then it's like I don't know. I can't relate to you people on the other side, right? Where I'm only fighting for things on the basis of what's in my best interest, rather than what's on principle needs to happen, right? Like
uh-huh.
that to me is the premise for my work. Like if principally that needs to happen, I'm gonna fight for it. That's what needs to happen, whether or not it benefits me immediately. It's or ever. It's
Because
not of consequence.
to me, like as it relates, like so let's look at across the water in the continent of Africa, where they have the most wealthy, I guess the most wealthy, continent in the world in terms of resources.
Right,
And so, as far as like the sovereignty or liberation of these different countries,
right,
so the West and above you, north of you, having a vested interest in instability
right,
because it's just cheaper to pay a government than to go through like a robust political framework.
right.
It's just to send you
100%.
a case of
Right,
money. So they're
right.
gonna be like so you read about Operation Condor,
Mhm,
America's activities in South America. We had a
mhm.
vested interest in like instability in that country from a trade perspective. We want people that are
Right,
friendly to us, and so it's harder. But it's just beside the point. It's harder for like the Congo is a big example. Like they killed off
right,
that dude. I'm like
right,
because he successfully tried to organize for
right,
a government reflective of the people and accountability in the Congo. But I'm like,
right.
am I going to move over there and participate in that fight? Probably not. Like I live, I live here.
Which
You
is
know,
fine. Which is
I'm
fine.
you get what I'm
Which
saying?
is fine. But perhaps, right, what the issue is, and I'm glad that we kept talking because it's helped me to understand the underlying issue, right? Where I think it's a particularly Western framework of like operation to believe that you only fight for things that are in your best interest, that you have an inherent kind of,
That's anywhere in the planet.
economic. Hmm?
That's anywhere in the planet.
No, that's what I'm trying to say. Like there are different modes of operation that I think when you're inculcated in America's educational institutions, especially in the business school framework, you can't acknowledge that there are communities and like traditional like systems that don't operate on that premise at all. And a lot of what I see in certain communities in Ghana. Of course, like Western imperialism has, overarchingly tried to change that dynamic. But at the grassroots level, there's still communities that believe in just fighting for things that are there to which they're not economically aligned or
Why,
they're
why
not
do you think they have
directly
these
gonna.
wars? But why do you think they had these wars?
What
Like
wars?
like wars anywhere on planet Earth, like tribal conflicts, civil wars, etc., etc. It's just a group of people at the top that
Right.
like it's in their best interest. But it's just like they feel
But
like this
that,
is
I
in their
mean,
best
that's
interest.
like, I feel like that's very, that's overarching and doesn't really allow for nuance and conversation. You can look at all of the history of like wars around the world, and then there's a separate history of people working collaboratively, of people like seeking to heal, of even to this day. Like I remember there were groups when I was in college who came to our campus. We were like super progressive
I'm just
campus,
saying
and
people don't fight wars over like what they tell. Like so
but
U.S.
all of
going
human
over
all
into
but
Afghanistan
that's what I'm
ain't had
saying,
nothing to
like,
do with freedom.
but that's what I'm saying, right? I don't operate on the premise of America's, like, that's the thing, like, and I don't think America's kind of framework of making decisions or like of investment is the only one that works for the world. I fundamentally don't operate on that,
Yo,
right? So
man.
whatever the US does for wars, I also have countless examples of people who are fighting for justice, for communities of which they have no vested
But
interest
just
in.
tell me about governments, though. I'm in the context of government. So the Ghana government does what's in its economic best interest.
Um,
The
not
Nigerian
necessarily.
government does
It's
what's
no, not
they
really.
would have to.
No, but that, I mean, that would be, I don't want
If
to
you
like
think,
get into that.
okay, so if you think that Ghana or some of these countries didn't have to borrow from China, they would. They still would.
Um,
No,
Warren, I feel like that would be going outside of the context of this conversation, because I think there are a lot of nuances in what I see is
that's the
happening in
capital
like
markets.
African. Well, I'll leave it at that. But I'm glad we've come to like some understanding, and
Yeah.
I've learned so much from you during this time. Like I'm so grateful. We've touched 2 hours. Like this is crazy. Exactly. So thank you so much for like making yourself available. I know you have so much on your plate and you still did this. I think for my audience, this will be so insightful, to have us, to hear us have this conversation like freely, no prepared questions, no prepared answers, just like speaking from the heart. And I really appreciate you speaking passionately, educating me on things I didn't know about. And I'm glad we've kind of,
Same here.
I'm yeah, I'm gonna really, I think, I do want to, because I listen to, I guess that'll be my final point, then you can say yours. I listened to J. Cole's new song, Snow on the Bluff, and he was making a point about, I don't know if you've heard it, but his overarching argument was like, sometimes the way in which you say things may like antagonize the people you're trying to reach in the first place. And I would hate for that to be my story, because like I said, I feel like I've sacrificed so much to do this work, right? So I really appreciate you pointing that out to me. I think I definitely want to be more solutions oriented when I talk about our relationship. Um, and I want to be careful of like the kind of the maybe the stereotypes and tropes that I may be throwing around that I don't know. So thank you for that.
Yeah, same here. Yeah, first being willing to have this conversation and sort of not getting too mad at me. I know that
But you definitely had my heart racing a couple of
I
times.
get it. And I agree with your J. Cole sentiment. It's the wording is the semantics is sort of more important. So
Important.
that's a big takeaway for me, because I think that we want to be solution oriented, and sort of having these controversial conversations are necessary, and sort of
Right.
building how do we move forward. I think that's very important. So thank you for being willing to sort of have the conversation. That's something I admired about you for sure. Yeah, so,
Thank you so much.
yeah, for
Oh,
sure.
thank you so much. I'm